Okay, so Donald Trump was recently on Lex Fridman's podcast just yesterday, and I think this was the worst performance Donald Trump has done in an interview in a while. And I'm somebody who thinks he's a better candidate than Kamala Harris. I'm not just some Democrat or whatever, but I think this was actually a poor performance by Donald Trump, and actually probably not what he was intending to do, but a great performance by Lex Fridman. If you're actually trying to challenge Donald Trump and put him in some tight spots and kind of make him defend some of his positions. Now, I want to comment first before I go over why I think this was actually an effective interview in, like, quote unquote exposing Donald Trump, because it was not a gotcha interview. And some of these people, especially on like the liberal side of the aisle, are obsessed with this mindset of the 2016, let's get Donald Trump on television and try to corner him. Donald Trump, first of all, will probably just win. He's very good at that. Secondly, even if Trump doesn't win, the interview is going to come across as a hostile hit job anyway, and you're not going to change anybody's mind. The way Lex does it here is far more sophisticated, and I don't even know if it's necessarily that sophisticated, just far more effective at getting a candidate to speak and get like explain their ideas. But quickly, I'm going to cover two tweets. This one here from Secular Talk says, Lex Fridman seems like a good dude and means well, but his interview with Trump was completely embarrassing. It totally was not. Trump said countless factually false things, and he just sat there and did not check them. If you're going to interview a former president and leading candidate, you have to be prepared on policy. Pathetic. This is, I think, in my opinion, projecting his own selfishness onto Lex Fridman in terms of if he was interviewing Trump, he would hop in and just explain and let the audience know how smart he was when Donald Trump says something that he believes is false or just straight up is false. He'll feel the need to cut him off, hop in there. You're wrong, blah, blah, blah. Say this fact. There is a third participant in every one of these internet discussions. There's the interviewer, the interviewee, and then the audience. A lot of these people who are obsessed with gotcha interviews, obsessed with egos, their own ego in an interview like this, showing everybody how smart they are. The third party there is the audience, and they can get to make up their own mind. And I think a lot of these people just totally forget that. They make the interview all about them, and I think everyone is now familiar with that if you follow politics, the obsession with the gotcha interview. And then one more here from this JJ McCullough, who's a guy from Canada. But I think this JJ guy just has Trump derangement syndrome. But he says, I had never seen anything from Lex Fridman before. First, so okay, Lex's style is not like a gotcha interview. So this almost, that statement alone just kind of essentially negates what he's going to say here. But I'd heard he's some beloved interview guy. His interview with Trump, and again, that is very cringe and such a red flag. That Lex Fridman is incredibly popular. It's almost just bragging that you're just esoteric and you don't follow me. That's just an incredibly cringe way to start off a tweet. Lex is very popular. Just don't leave, even if you don't know who he is or don't know much about him, just leave that part out. We don't care that you're this esoteric, interesting guy who's not mainstream. Anyway, his interview with Trump was terrible. He just asked him softballs, let him ramble, and pressed him on nothing. Not worth listening to. It's revealing that Trump does all these interviews with big shot podcasters and streamers and that they never make news. It's because Trump is too incoherent. He never answers questions, just rambles about off-topic nonsense, and these suck-up hosts just let it happen. But to the independent voter, I believe that this was a poor interview by Donald Trump, and it's not Lex's job to convince people of that. Just let the guy speak and ask a few follow-up questions, which Lex did, and then the people watching the interview, I honestly think that the guys like this JJ and the Secular Talk, it's like you just forget that the audience has their own brain and they're going to narrate the interview the way they're going to anyway and come up with their own thoughts, positive or negative, on what is happening. And I just think the whole hand-holding gotcha interview style is completely broken, but apparently not to these people. But anyway, now I'm going to get into the interview itself, and I'm going to cover just a few parts where I think Lex does actually a very effective job at answering a few follow-up questions, and where Donald Trump, I think, gives pretty poor answers, and I think it looks poor to almost anybody who's going to watch the entirety of this interview. So with that said, guys, I'll say one more thing. I believe Donald Trump did a poor job in this interview. He still is ahead of Kamala because he showed up. And I don't know how you debate that. He's showing up. He's still the candidate. Kamala looks like just the Democratic Party staff because she won't even show up. So they say like 50% of life is just showing up. Trump just gets that by showing up. So I still think he's ahead of Kamala, but I'll explain why I think he did poorly in this interview just right now.
One of the great things about people from the business world is they're often great deal makers. And you're a great deal maker. And you've talked about the war in Ukraine and that you would be able to find a deal that both Putin and Zelensky would accept. What do you think that deal looks like?
I think the deal, and I wouldn't talk about it too much because I think I can make a deal. If I win as president-elect, I'll have a deal made, guaranteed. Biden, I watched the interview the other night. I mean, it was just a softball interview.
Tough topic, but important. You said lost by a whisker. I'm an independent. I have a lot of friends who are independent, many of whom like your policies, like the fact that you're a deal maker, like the fact that you can end wars, but they are troubled by what happened in the 2020 election and statements about widespread fraud and this kind of stuff, fake electoral scheme. What can you say to those independent voters to help them decide who to vote for?
I think
So first of that's a great question. And even the way he framed it is so fair and a very legitimate concern that a ton of independent voters would have in this election. So, and he's not asking it like a jerk, like the people not I mean you can ask that's a tough question, but the people who are like at CNN will ask that in such a hostile way that you're going to get a terrible answer. And Lex asks it in an even-handed way, and I think Donald Trump's answer to this is absolutely terrible the entire time. So let's hear what he says.
Fraud was on the other side. I think the election was a fraud. And
see, and just even the way he starts that off, like, how are you going to reassure those people? It almost seems like Donald Trump has completely given up. I think perhaps this is like a conscious decision of trying to win over the people that don't like his rhetoric on this issue. I think maybe he's already tried, or maybe he thinks he already has, and he just says it's never going to work, so whatever. I do think that, I mean, this is a little bit debatable, but I do think that a guy like Joe Rogan still not being fully on Trump's side when Trump has tried to tone down a lot of his rhetoric, if you compare it to 2016, maybe Donald Trump, just in his like meetings with whatever new campaign staffer Corey Lewandowski, just says, let's just go full MAGA now. I don't know. So we'll see.
many people felt it was that, and they wanted answers. And when you can't challenge an election, you have to be able to challenge it. Otherwise, it's going to get worse, not better.
I don't know why he's saying that.
And
This is a
there are
terrible
lots of
answer.
ways to solve this problem. Go to paper ballots, do it the easy way. I mean, the paper ballots, and you have voter ID, and you have same-day voting, and you have proof of citizenship, which is very important because we have people voting that are not citizens. They just came in, and they're loading up the payrolls. They're loading up everything. They're putting students in schools that don't speak a word of English, and they're taking the seats of people that are citizens of our country. So, look, we have the worst border in the history of the world. We have coming into our country right now millions and millions of people at levels that nobody's ever seen. I don't believe any country's ever seen it. And they would use sticks and stones not to make it happen, not to let it happen. We don't do anything. And we have a person who was a border czar, who now said she wasn't really the border czar, but she was. She was the border czar, but she was in charge of the border. And we have her, and she's saying very strongly, "Oh, I did such a good job. She was horrible."
And so again, the question here is about the 2020 election and trying to basically ensure independent voters that something like that won't happen, or just a way to make that a better process. And he just starts rambling off, which he does, but I feel like the people watching this video can think for themselves and realize that he's not answering the question.
Horrible. The harm she's done. But we have people coming in from other countries all over the world, not just South America, and they're coming in from prisons and jails. They're coming in from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're street criminals. Right off the street, they take them, and they're being given to our country. Drug dealers, human traffickers. We're destroying our country. This is a sin what's been allowed to take place over the last 4 years. We're destroying our country, and we'll see how that all works out. But it's not even believable. And now you saw in Aurora, Colorado, a group of very tough young thugs from Venezuela taking over big areas, including buildings. They're taking over buildings. They have their big rifles, but they're taking over buildings. We're not going to let this happen. We're not going to let them destroy our country. And in those countries, crime is way down. They're taking them out of their prisons, which is good because good for them. I do the same thing. By the way, if I ran one of those countries, any country in the world, I would make sure that America has every one of our prisoners. Every one of our criminals would be here. I can't believe they're going so slowly, but some aren't. But they all are doing it. And we can't let that happen. They're emptying out their prisons and their mental institutions into the United States of America. We can't let that happen.
So a lot of people believe that there was some shady stuff that went on with the election, whether it's media bias or big tech, but still the claim of widespread fraud is the thing that bothers people.
Well, I don't focus on the past. I focus on the future. I mean, I talk about how bad the economy is, how bad inflation.
So again, that's again a follow-up. Donald Trump's rambling. Why do the mistake of the last 10 years of the mainstream media and go and make this hostile? This interview so far at this point is 19 minutes into it, roughly. Why would you do that? Just derail the conversation. Then Donald Trump gets to tweet, oh, Lex Fridman's another mainstream Democratic operative or whatever he'd say. And we need to drain the swamp, or we need to fight against people like this because they're like an arm of the Democratic Party or whatever. So I think just Lex, good follow-up. And he'll follow up a couple more times here on this topic. But I think if you're watching this interview, like, this is a terrible answer, in my opinion, from Trump. And it's something he's had 4 years basically to figure out how to answer this question. This is just like an unacceptable answer, I think.
Inflation is. How bad things like, which is important. Afghanistan was, in my opinion, the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to our country. And because of that, I think Putin went in. When he said how stupid we were, Putin went in. But it was the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. I really believe that. But, we left 13 dead soldiers. Think of it, 13 dead soldiers. Many soldiers horrifically hurt with arms, likes of which nobody's ever left behind before. Billions and billions by the election, but we would have been out with dignity and strength. We were having very little problem with the Taliban when I was there because they knew it was going to be tough. I dealt with Abdul. Abdul was the leader, and we got along fine. He understood. But, they were killing a lot of our people before I came down. And when I got there, I spoke to him, I said, can't do it. Don't do it anymore. We went 18 months before this happened. This horrible day happened. We went 18 months and nobody was shot at or killed.
What do you think that was, the carrot or the stick in that case in Afghanistan?
The stick, definitely.
So
the
the threat of military force.
That was the stick, yeah. It doesn't have to be, but that was the stick.
Well, let me just linger on the election a little bit more. For this election, it might be a close one. What can we do to avoid the insanity and division of the previous election, whether you win or lose?
Well, I hope it's not a close one. I mean, I don't know how people can vote for somebody that has destroyed our country. The inflation, the bad.
Again, tremendous follow-up, and it's probably what most like reasonably intelligent people, unless you're a total Trump person watching this interview, or just a total like Trump derangement syndrome, you're just going to criticize any answer he gives. This is probably what most independent-minded thinkers are watching this interview thinking. Why isn't he answering the question with the 2020 election? Even if somebody like I guess, but other people, I do think Trump is still a better candidate than Kamala. Give a better answer though on this question. I want him to have some like thoughtful answer about what went wrong in 2020 and how that won't happen again in 2024. This is like truthfully a 0 out of 10 answer from Donald Trump. And again, I'm gonna go back a little because Lex Fridman. So that's 2 follow-ups now on this. But the people online just want these election interviews to turn into screaming at each other. Nobody gets any value out of that. It just, other than like, if you do that, you get to brag to your other liberal friends, like, hey, look at this cool takedown. I think that's the only value in it. It's just for yourself. It's not for the actual undecided voter. But I'm going to turn the speed down a little bit here and just watch kind of that question again.
And a little bit more. For this election, it might be a close one. What can we do to avoid the insanity and division of the previous election, whether you win or lose?
Well, I hope it's not a close one. I mean, I don't know how people can vote for somebody that has destroyed our country.
0.
The inflation, the bad economy, but to me, in a way, the worst is what they've allowed to happen at our border, where they've allowed millions of people to come in here from places that you don't want to know.
And so, look, obviously Donald Trump is deflecting and not taking responsibility at all whatsoever. Why does Lex Fridman need to just flip? What does he need to do? Flip the table over, Donald Trump's mic off, throw a hissy fit? No, everyone watching this can see, I think, not everybody. There's people who are just so far anti-Trump or so far pro-Trump. The majority, I believe, of independent voters or independent-minded thinkers or people that are at least undecided voters or whatever you want to call it, are going to watch this and say, this answer sucks. So what's Lex supposed to do? He already asked 2 follow-ups, gave Donald Trump a chance to get back on message on this question twice, and he's not. So this is like a fail, in my opinion. This is an absolute F of a question or of an answer by Donald Trump.
Know about. And I can't believe that that's going to be a close election. We're leading in the polls, and it looks close, but I think in the end, it's not going to be a close election.
What do you think is the right way to solve the immigration crisis? Is mass deportation?
So look, now he'll shift, but that's fine. Like, this interview could be literally derailed by that. This is probably the way MSNBC, CNN, ABC would have made probably the next 30 minutes of this interview about their own ego and trying to get Donald Trump to get into their little word box so they can try to clip a little headline, put on their website, and then get a bunch of clicks in the moment for whatever, make more money over the next 6 hours. Far smarter play by Lex Fridman here. Like, just the more intelligent play, the more mature play. In a sense, to be honest, like, I don't think Lex Fridman went into this trying to do this, but this is the play that actually does, in my opinion, expose Donald Trump far more than the gotcha nonsense. So anyway, I think I made my point there. Yeah, so I'm gonna go to the next part here, where I think Donald Trump gives another unsatisfactory answer. So I skipped ahead about 10 minutes. It's a kind of a similar topic, but not really. It just kind of has similar themes, I suppose. But the topic here, at least in the YouTube video, is called division, but we'll hear what Lex says here.
The country seems more divided than ever.
Yeah.
What can you do to help alleviate some of that division?
Well, you can get rid of these two people. They're terrible. They're terrible. You don't want to have them running this country. They're not equipped to run it. Joe.
So again, what are these answers from Donald Trump? Why can't he say? It almost seems like I said before, he's made a conscious decision to just stop trying to be moderate in a lot of these ways when he's in these interviews. Maybe that's just a losing strategy. Maybe when he tried to appeal to the middle, because I do think Donald Trump, people think he never listens to anybody. I do think he actually does. He for sure wants to win. So I think he would definitely take feedback from people that he would even disagree with. Like, say, someone like Nikki Haley, who perhaps she would say something like, hey, try to appeal to the moderates, try to whatever. I think he would take that information in and consider it and maybe even try it. Maybe he tried that and just poll numbers went down. So I don't know, but these answers just seem like that almost seems like such a softball question to be nice and to like extend a bridge or an olive branch to the other side, but he just goes right on the attack again. I don't understand.
It's a disaster. Okay. And Kamala, I think she'll end up being worse than him. We'll see. I think a lot's now, the convention's over with, and I see I'm leading in just about all the polls now. They had their little honeymoon period, as they call it. And we'll see how that all goes. Who knows?
From my personal opinion, I think you are at your best when you're talking about a positive vision of the future versus criticizing the other side.
Yeah.
And again, so that's like the second little softball Lex said, basically. He's just, that question might as well be, say something nice and listen to what Donald Trump says.
I think you have to criticize, though. I think they're nasty. They came up with a story that I looked down and I called soldiers that died in World War I suckers and losers. Okay. Now, number one, who would say that? Number two, who would say it to military people?
I don't know. This to me seems like it's a choice by the Trump campaign. That I don't know. This is me being just taking a guess, but it seems like what they're doing. This poll's better. Again, I don't know for sure, but I don't understand why you wouldn't just say, like every other politician probably in this case would say something unifying, or we need to come together, or we need to I want to be a president for all people, or whatever. Some just generic platitude. I don't know. Maybe that's why Donald Trump wins, because he knows something the rest of us don't fully understand. I mean, I think that's certainly plausible, because he does keep winning. He's up in the polls right now. He's already been the president once, so.
Made up story. It's just a made up story. And they like to repeat it over again. They know it was made up. I have 26 witnesses that nothing was said. They don't want to hear about that. Like she lied on McDonald's. She said that she worked at McDonald's. It's not a big lie, but it's a big lie. It's so, they just went and they checked. And unless you can show something, they don't talk about, the press is going to follow up with it, but I'll keep hammering it. But she never worked at McDonald's. It was just sort of a cool thing to say, hey, I worked at McDonald's,
So not only is Trump just rambling and not even listening really to the question that Lex said. I'm sure he heard it, but he's not answering it. He's actually doing the opposite. Lex said, I like you more when you're being positive, blah, blah, blah. He's literally answering the opposite of the question. It's funny, but this is incredible. So again, I think this is actually just a poor interview by Donald Trump, and I don't quite understand why he's doing it, but again, he is like the best at media in the world based on how much engagement he gets.
But one of the worst was 2 days ago, I went to Arlington at the request of people that lost their children. There'll always be children to those people. You understand that. That's not politically incorrect thing to say. The mother comes up, I lost my child. But, the child is a soldier. and lost a child because of Biden.
And so I believe there's one more thing I want to cover here, and then I'll end the video, but just give me 1 sec.
We asked him to be there.
Well, politicians and the media can play those games. And you're right. Your name gets a lot of views. You're probably legit the most famous person in the world. But on the previous thing, in the spirit of unity, you used to be a Democrat.
Yeah.
Setting the politicians aside, what do you respect most about people who lean left, who are Democrats themselves or of that persuasion, progressives, liberals, and so on?
So again, like Lex is giving him so many chances to be unifying or to even just give a message to the undecided voter. There would be probably a ton of people that watch Lex Fridman's podcast who would consider themselves more centrist. Lex Fridman, I believe, self-describes himself, that was a terrible sentence, but he describes himself as a centrist. He's essentially giving Donald Trump opportunities to give those people a sales pitch, and Donald Trump's just like taking the ball and just popping it. He's not answering these questions at all properly, in my opinion. Let's see what he says here.
Well, look, I respect the fact that everybody's in there. And, you know, to a certain extent, life is what you do while you're waiting to die. So you might as well do a good job. I think in terms of what's happening now, I think, you know, we have a chance to save the country. This country's going down. And I called it with Venezuela. I called it with a lot of different countries. And this country's going down. If we don't win this election, the election...
Okay, this is totally not answering the question. What do you like about... Basically, his question was, what do you like about Democrats? Not even about Democratic politicians. He said, what do you like about Democrats? And he just goes, this country's going down.
Coming up on November 5th is the most important election this country's ever had. Because if we don't win it, I don't know that there'll be another election. And it's going to be a communist country or close.
There's a lot of people listening to this, myself included, that doesn't think that Kamala is a communist.
Well, she's a Marxist.
Her father's a Marxist,
That's right.
And she's
It's a
advocating.
little unusual, you know.
She's advocating for some policies that are towards the direction.
So I'm going to stop it there, but I think I've kind of made my point that I think this was Donald Trump's weakest interview that he's done for quite a long time. I don't know why he just kept constantly going back to... He basically sounded like he was just trying to do a campaign speech, totally disregard Lex Fridman's questions. And again, my basic point that I said in the beginning, I don't think Lex would do himself or the viewer any favors by constantly jumping in. Excuse me, can you get back on track? Excuse me, can you answer the question? Excuse me, excuse me. Everyone that follows politics has seen more than enough of that over the last 10 years. It doesn't work. It only propels Donald Trump higher, if anything. So I think independents got to see a different kind of interview here, and perhaps they came away with us having a more negative view of Donald Trump. I mean, I certainly did, but a little bit. Like, I still, again, view Donald Trump more favorably than Kamala Harris, and a lot of that is due to the fact that Kamala Harris literally won't even show up. So anyway, with that said, thank you for watching this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, whether you agree with what I said or you disagree. Either way, let me know. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.